All right. We've got a lot to cover today. I actually spent most of this morning trying to cut down my message. Such a significant message. I've been looking forward to preaching this for such a long time. In this series, we are going to talk about the type of wise decisions that are hard to measure. You know, the kind of decisions when you're making the decision and the reward of that decision, you can't even quantify it. You're in the deciding point and you think, oh man, I wonder what will come out of it. So I'm really hoping this will transform your life. I know it's made a big difference in mine. So I'm going to get straight into the content for today by giving you two examples that I hope will get you started in understanding what we're trying to talk about today. The message, by the way, is sow into wisdom. Okay, COVID. Imagine someone discovered a way to stop COVID and every other variant in its tracks. Someone discovered. How much would that be worth? Just think about it for a second, right? Billions? Maybe in the height of COVID, when everyone was locked down and the death count was spiraling out of control, maybe the value of that might be trillions, right? Especially if you consider all the secondary effects. Knowing what we know now today, I reckon, my goodness, companies, governments, hospitals, even the average family would be like, I'd throw a little bit of money into that. I'd fund that if we could get out of lockdown, if we could stop all the, by the time everybody's tipping money into it and governments are throwing money, companies who've banked up all their logistics and all their stuff, by the time everybody's throwing money into this thing, it's probably trillions of dollars could be tipped into this little kitty to completely stop COVID, all of its effects in its tracks. So it's very easy then to see how much this cure could be worth, right? But now imagine it's 3 years ago. It's 2019. Just trying to figure out when it all started. And it's the very first few cases. It's not even 2020 yet. Very first few cases. And someone discovers a way to stop COVID in its tracks, to stop it from ever spreading, to eradicate the thing once and for all. Maybe knowing what we know right now, we might literally go up to that guy and pay him $1 billion. Here's $1 billion, do whatever it takes. We would do that, right? Humanity, all of us as humanity, would probably get a good deal by going, all of us combine $1 billion, let's just give this guy $1 billion and do whatever it takes and we're all done. But no, right? No, if we actually went back 3 years, if we were actually 3 years ago, it wouldn't happen. You know that. That guy would not get $1 billion. Because 3 years ago, you could not measure the benefit of his or her solution. It just wouldn't happen. Or how about this? Closer to my home. Closer to my home. So, yeah, very close to my home. Okay, my current home. Man and I are out of the house one day, okay? This is an advantage of having older kids. And my older two kids, Rachel and Nikki, they smell burning in the house. It must have been quite bad because, I don't even know, it takes quite a lot to get them out of bed. And, take action. Anyways, so they're like, oh man, something's really off. So they investigate together. And they discover that the smoke is coming out of our neighbor's house. So, but it's not coming out of the chimney. This is winter. It's not coming out of their chimney or their fireplace. It's coming out from their walls. So anyway, it's a rented place next door. It's kind of a shared home. People always changing over next door. And our kids have never gone next door to talk to our neighbor. We have, but our kids have never gone over to talk to them. And so they go over, two of them, like for, courage or whatever it is, the two of them go over next door, knock on the door, right? And my kids say, "Hey, mate." They put on their Aussie voice. "I think your house is smoking. Is everything okay?" And the head tenant, the main guy who's over there, goes, "Smoke from the wall and from the ceiling is normal." Yeah, it's just the kind of house we have. Whenever we put a fire in the fireplace, the smoke goes everywhere, and it's normal, and brushes them off. Anyway, 2 hours later, there are police cars, 2 fire trucks outside their house, and the whole place is burned down. The building is condemned, and it's deemed unlivable, and everybody is moving out. We had 50 people over at our orientation yesterday. I don't know if you guys noticed, the ones that came over to our house. I don't know if you noticed, next door, it's boarded up. There's a fence outside, and no one is living there. Thankfully, no one got hurt. But I got a chance to go in and talk to the guy, all of the guys actually, before they left. And they showed me around. They told me, I thought it'd be really bad to take photos for the sermon. So I'm like, it's okay. You guys have to imagine it. But the fire had gone through their ducted heating system and was blown into every single room in their house. Within minutes, the guys were saying, "My goodness, it was just fine. And then suddenly fire was coming down from the duct at the top, and the ceiling caught on fire, their curtains caught on fire, and it just went, and they all ran out of the house. Anyway, that's when it turbocharged and nothing could be done to stop it. They lost everything, and the owner of the house now has to demolish the house. And it turns out that the fire was actually burning for a long time within the walls and in the ceiling until it hit the ventilation system. Anyway, we come home from our trip. All this happens while we're away, by the way. And we come home from our trip to this scene with police and firemen, and we ask our 2 kids, "What happened?" And I can still remember the last words that our kids said to us after they told us the story. They said, "Dad, the guy laughed at us and said we didn't know anything." Sometimes you just wish you could go back in time. I mean, today, I want to help you at whatever stage of life you're at. Even if you don't like church, or you don't like your parents, or you're like, I don't know, forced in here to church. Today, I'm hoping to make some kind of an impact or difference in your life because you've showed up at church today. We're going to dig deeper into the area of wisdom. It's our whole year's theme. Right, we're going through all the various wisdom books. We're in this area where it's not rules, it's not like necessarily sin or religion, right? And don't worry, there's definitely times where we're going to be talking about sin and religion and rules. My goodness, we're a church that doesn't avoid those topics. But today, we're going to talk a little about in the category of wisdom. Andy Stanley says, most of your biggest regrets were preceded by unwise decisions. Before you have actually done anything really wrong, before you do anything really bad that you're just going to go, "Oh my goodness, I don't know what price I'm going to have to pay for this." Before that are a series of unwise decisions. And I wonder, as you're making those unwise decisions, even I think about this myself, as I make these unwise decisions, I wonder if we know how much these decisions are costing us. And that's because we know Like, I mean, we don't have to go like very long-winded to sort of explain this, right? But we know that prevention is better than cure. There are some things, even if you have the money, you can't reverse it back. But there is, because of this bias towards things that we can measure, we naturally, I feel, we focus towards cure-type things. Now we're willing to pay for a cure for COVID. You know, it's just hard to measure the benefits of prevention. And I wonder when this bias, I wonder if it plays out in our lives, whether sometimes we just lean towards the things that are easily quantifiable. We know we can get information about it, right? And we don't calculate the cost, or we don't calculate the benefit even of the things that can't be measured. That's why the series is called Immeasurable. Imagine you walk out for a date with your wife, and you're going to, it's new habits have formed in COVID, and you discover walking on a date is really exciting. So like you and your wife, you decide, hey, we're going to go out for a date, and we're going to talk for an hour together as we walk the neighborhood. But you check your phone, and the information tells you it's cold. And you're going to stop at a cafe, and you look, and Google says the cafe is at peak time. You're like, oh, it's going to be crowded. It's cold. You can measure these things nowadays. And so you decide, we're just going to cancel. We're not going to go on that walk. And your marriage takes a hit. But what kind of a hit does your marriage take? Not much, right? I mean, realistically, you're like, it's fine. I'm sure we can survive without that. And so you can't really measure the impact of that decision. Or maybe you watch shows and you play games, right? Like I do this, and you get immediate feedback. You get immediate response. Oh, watch a show, recharge. Oh, play games, I won. I'm up to level 2 or whatever it is, right? Immediate feedback. You get enjoyment, you get recharge. Fantastic. But you do that and you miss time with God. You miss time with kids. You miss time reading or learning. How do you measure? How do you measure what you've given up for something that is going to give you immediate feedback of something you can immediately measure? We are like, oh my goodness, that's it. Like, I'm recharged. I've watched like 20 episodes of some Korean drama. This is great. How do you measure that? Wisdom requires you to dig deeper into the immeasurable, and it pays you back with things that are immeasurable, or with the immeasurable. I like, as you know, we've just finished this series on Job, right? So I love this chapter in Job 28, where Job sort of describes this kind of dilemma. And it goes like this. I would recommend that you just you bookmark chapter 28 and you just read the whole thing. I don't have time to unpack the whole thing. But Job begins like this. The chapter begins like this. Surely there is a mine for silver, a place for gold that they refine. Iron, it's taken out of the earth, right? And copper is smelted from the ore. What's going on here is, it means that when we can see something precious, when we see something that is wise, we can recognize that it's useful, it's valuable, because, we see it. But then when we do that, we inherently ask the question, well, where did that come from? It must have come from somewhere. You don't just magically get silver, and because I don't see silver lying around on the floor all the time, there must be a mine for it. It must, somewhere where I can't see, somewhere, it must exist. And it's been refined somehow. I don't know. But it must come from somewhere. It's like when you see a good marriage and you go, wow, that's really good. I wish for that. There must be something going on behind the scenes. Surely if you've been married long enough, you know that these things don't just poof happen, right? And then He goes in and says, man puts his hand to the flinty rock and he overturns mountains by the root. Wow, this guy is searching for wisdom, searching for this. Where is it found? Very seriously. He cuts out channels in the rocks. His eye sees every precious thing. He dams up streams so that they don't trickle. And the thing that is hidden, he brings out to light. And so we look for it. We have to search out for wisdom. And we do whatever it takes. But my goodness, it's so hard to find. Where shall wisdom be found? Where is this place of understanding? Man doesn't even know its worth. And it's not really found in the land of the living. And the deep says, you're looking around everywhere. The deep says, it's not in me. And the sea says, it's not with me. And it cannot be bought for gold. And silver cannot be weighed as its price. It cannot be valued in the gold of Ophir, and in precious onyx or sapphire. Gold and glass cannot equal it, and it cannot be exchanged for jewels of fine gold. My way of summarizing all of that, immeasurable. It doesn't matter how hard it is to find. Where is it? It is worth finding. The price of wisdom is above pearls, precious stones, gold. It's immeasurable. And just to sort of complete it, no spoilers, I guess. This is where Job always lands. In 28, the end of that chapter, and he said to man, behold the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to turn away from evil is understanding. I'd like to, if I could, and so please try to follow. I've cut a lot of stuff from this sermon, so I'm going to try to, as best as I can, help you through this. I'm going to jump to the end. Well, as far as my present life will take me. So we're going to jump to the very end. And I want to talk a little bit, if I could, about what it's like to stand on the shoulders of wisdom. And I know that this is not often talked about because there's genuine pressure and condemnation, actually, that comes when we talk about standing on the shoulders of wisdom. Because many of us, and I see this as a pastor, many of us have not had the privilege of standing on the shoulders of wisdom. So instead, there's a lot of us, we're reaping the effects of foolishness in our lives. And so then when a guy comes up, and says, oh, these are the benefits of standing on the shoulders of wisdom, you're thinking, oh my goodness, what is this guy talking about? It's unrelatable completely. But I'll just say this. Every one of us have areas of wisdom, and we have areas of foolishness as well. I'm just going to try to paint as honest and as genuine a picture as I can. Also, you guys have heard our talk on health and fitness, right? And so this is in the category of fitness. If you're not healthy, if you're actually not in a great state, what you want to do is make sure that you're fixing that broken leg before you're running. But this is broadly in the fitness category. But anyway, here we go. In my life, so just if I could talk with you honestly for a second. In my actual life, I'm very, very grateful to have had a healthy foundation. And I understand that it's not perfect. But Pastor Roland handed me a healthy church. He handed it over to me in a healthy manner. I've now, as the vice president of our denomination, as being on the board of White Horse Churches Care with 29 other churches, having gone to many other churches that are outside of both of those categories to help them with transitions, I've now discovered the immeasurable benefit of being handed a church in a healthy manner that is already healthy. My parents not only raised me well, but they provided for me a good foundation. please hear me really carefully, because I have grappled for so long about whether I should talk about this or not. I fully understand, and my life's not perfect, but I understand that even as a migrant, I'm privileged. I can't change that. I don't know, I can't go back and undo how Uncle Roland handed the church over, or how I grew up, or I can't change that. It's the foundation that I literally grew up on. My challenge right now is to use that privilege to help others and to bring God's will here on earth. That's my challenge. But there are very, very definite benefits of being able to inherit or stand on a ground where wisdom has laid its foundation. You know, next week, I hope you guys come for next week. And I said, I'm so excited about next week. We've managed to get Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Foh come and speak. You may have seen him on TV. He was the first multicultural representative for the Salvation Army. They sent him over to Canberra. He was the head of Hong Kong Salvos before he came to Australia. Well, he came from here, then he went to Hong Kong, and then he came back. And he was a refugee to Australia, a Vietnamese refugee to Australia. And I wonder what was going on with the people who helped him out when he first came over. You'll hear about it next week. The Christian action or social action that took place that helped this guy out. I bet you those people could not calculate the reward that the whole world, this nation, would get from their act of helping a refugee out. I wonder whether my parents, Pastor Roland, I wonder what they're thinking, what they were thinking when they were making sacrifices in establishing this church. I often saw them take the high ground, doing the right thing, sometimes at great cost to themselves. They were reconciling with people that they didn't even like. And some of you are still in the church. Sometimes it was me. I still remember Uncle Alan scolding me when I was a youth, you know. I only imagine that he just decided to be patient with me. Doing things because they were trying to move in God's way with God's wisdom. But the reality is, I don't need to wonder, because I know firsthand what they were thinking. I'm able to talk to Uncle Alan. I'm able to talk to my parents and Uncle Roland. We have the actual privilege of having some of our leaders around, and so you can talk to them. And I know what they were thinking. I've seen Uncle Roland, our elders, many of our leaders eat humble pie, apologize when they didn't need to apologize. And all of this is going on in my head. And then sometimes, I just give you a behind-the-scenes picture of what my inner life is like. Then sometimes I hear people say, this is in my head. I've seen these great men of faith, Pastor Roland, who pastored a church of like 5,000 or whatever it is. I've seen them do these things. It's in my head. And then I meet people, and then they say, you know what? I'm not going to apologize. I'm not going to do that. I'm too important. I'm too smart. I am too senior to do this thing. And you know what? The other person, they are not honoring me. They should be the one to do this, because I am not going to do the humble thing. And in my head, and I apologize if this makes me a worse pastor, but I just want to be genuine with you. In my head, most of the time, I just go, okay, great. Take the position of pride and watch that play out in your life. It'll be the foundation that you build for your future. I talked to Uncle Alan and these elders, and I know what they were thinking. They were investing in things that could not be measured at the time that they were doing it. And maybe now we have some kind of glimpse of the benefits of that. sometimes now people are like, oh yeah, wow, I'm so glad they did that. Oh man, like, but at that time, could they have put a dollar figure on it, or could they have measured it exactly? I don't know. So anyway, I'm conscious that there is a new generation in this church, and we are right now in the midst of building a future, a new post-COVID future, new families, new stages of life, right? Some of you are going to high school, you're going to uni, you started new jobs, there are new marriages. Like, oh my goodness, you wouldn't believe how many weddings we're doing. Some of you are becoming in-laws for the first time, new grandparents, newly retired. Fantastic. What are you going to do in this season? What I'm hoping as a one-liner for today is that you'd write down, what is the wise thing for me to do in this season of my life? What is the wise thing? What will you sow that will reap things immeasurable? And I'm not going to tell you answers. You need to figure this out yourself, right? But if you don't figure it out, the metrics of the day, or the measurements of the day, or the stats of the feedback of the day will lead you to the next thing to do in this season. You just go, oh, this is what feels right. This is what I'm getting some feedback on it. Yeah, this is what I'll do. You'll be like a person who's lost in the woods, just trying to take one step at a time without actually looking at where you're going. Now, I want to do a bit of a caveat here again. A lot of disclaimers when you do a message like this. My goodness, like, it's prone to being misunderstood. I'm not saying that we need to live everything perfect, or that the idea of wisdom is like, man, you hit a home run every single time. In fact, failure can even be a doorway to wisdom. So we're not talking about always successes. Failure and success are like two sides to one coin. I like what John Maxwell says, and he's got some great teaching on this. But John Maxwell says that he discovered the importance of failure when he went around. He interviews leaders all the time. He sells millions of books on leadership, whatever, right? And he got into the habit of asking the people he interviewed, what was the greatest lesson you've ever learned? What was the greatest lesson that you've ever learned? And he found that almost always, a very, very high percentage, would tell the story of a failure or a difficult season of their life. And they would say, oh, I did this, but you know what? This is what I learned. I mean, I remember, not that I'm a great leader or anything, but I remember, if you asked me what the greatest lesson of my life was, it was when I was forced to do accounting, which is terrible, by the way. Yep, and I'm naturally not oriented to accounting. Yep, and the greatest, and I flunked, right? My greatest learning was details matter. My greatest learning was actually that you need to sometimes do really boring things well so that you can thrive. Because I wasn't inherently wired to do those things. ENTP for the win, But and that was, I'll tell you now, that was my greatest lesson. Failure can actually produce good fruit, but it needs repentance. You need to have learning in there. You need wisdom to grow wisdom, unfortunately. So we're not talking about perfect and flawless lives. Okay, so there are many things that we can talk about right now at this juncture, right? Oh man, so many things to cover. So I'm going to hone in. I guarantee you this will be shorter sermon because I've cut a lot of stuff out. But I'm going to hone in on one of the main reasons. Anyway, we have a whole year on wisdom, so today only one thing, right? One of the main reasons why we often don't take the path of wisdom and we end up just doing the quick, easy thing. And I'm going to land as we kick off this series on over-reliance on feedback and measurement. You can tell an accountant is over-reliance on feedback and measurement for things that they were never designed to measure. And I'm not saying metrics are bad. Oh my goodness. Like those statistics of men who are lonely, you better believe it, that unless we do something about it, it's going to affect the quality of your life, the quality of your family's future. Like, I'm not saying stats are wrong, they're bad. I'm not saying that feedback and measurement is terrible. I'm saying that there is an entire category of things that you're never going to be measuring, that never get measured. And if you ignore that, and you only go where, oh man, I'm only gonna do things with my wife if she reciprocates and I get some good feedback on it. All right, fine. Like, just go ahead. You're going to miss out on that world that Job talks about, that is buried so deep that you can go in and get real gold out of it. So anyway, over-reliance on feedback and measurement is going to be the thing that we're going to talk about. Why are we going to talk about it? Because the thing is, I don't know if you've realized this, I'm sure you have, there is a delay between sin and the consequences of sin. There's actually a delay between wisdom and the consequences of wisdom. Like, there's an actual delay. You could sin and nothing happens. And you're like, wow, I think I got away with it, man. And then you can sin again. And you know what? Maybe tomorrow you're fine. Or you could eat humble pie, you could do the right godly thing, right? And then, like I heard yesterday at the orientation, somebody gave tithes for the first time and then lost their job. Like, okay. Like you could do the right thing and then it instantaneously maybe doesn't pay off. I like this verse in Ecclesiastes. We did Ecclesiastes before Job. Because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily, the heart of the children of man is fully set to do evil, because we feel like, hey, you're not going to punish me immediately. So though a sinner does evil 100 times and prolongs his life, yet I know that it will be well with those who fear God, because they fear before him. Meaning, even if you seemingly can get away with it for so long, at some point you reap what you sow. That's why I think Proverbs says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. You recognize God's place in all of that, even if things are delayed. But we have become, as a society, so reliant on short-term feedback. I literally talk to people who have just started work, and they're like, I don't think this is working out for me. I know I'm 2 weeks in, but my boss hasn't given me any feedback. I'm like, 2 whole weeks? But that's us. I'm not making fun of everybody. It's just us. I'm like this as well. We're so conditioned nowadays to get feedback on stuff. How did you go? How's the thing? I want to get the answer immediately, right? And we need to tackle this, because I fear that this bias is moving us towards things, it's making us skip long-term things that are very wise. And you're doing things that you can see the immediate payoff in. Now, I'm going to jump across a whole bunch of assumptions and inner workings. So if you want to have a detailed discussion about what I'm going to talk about next, I'm more than happy to sit down and talk about change theory, pleasure centers, addiction, spirituality, all kinds of things, right? But please let me go fast for the next 10 minutes if you could, because I think even if I go fast and I skip through a lot of the detail, you'll inherently understand what I'm talking about without the long slides of proof. So this is me shortening the sermon, all right? I want to talk a little bit about our natural feedback system. as human beings, what is our natural feedback system? And that, at some level, without getting technical, is the pleasure centers in our brain or in our body. Right? And I picked this up at the ACM conference this week, which was such a good conference. Right? Dr. Alan Meyer was speaking. I wrote these things down. I wrote down, actually, and he got this. I just finished reading the book that he recommended. Yeah, Archibald Hart, Thrilled to Death. Very, very good book. Anyway, it turns out we are creatures that are created for gentle pleasures. We are like a fine connoisseur creation. That means we can detect that one coffee is slightly burnt. We can listen to music and discern, oh my goodness, that is a great sonnet. That is a great speaker system because it's picking up the really expensive things in life are when we can attune ourselves to these stimulus or these pleasures, right? But what happens when we overload our senses? What happens then if we are created like these finely tuned creatures and we bam, bam, overload it with feedback, information, pleasure, response. What happens? Well, let's just have a quick discussion about how our body works, just really, really quickly. And there are doctors in here, people in here that can explain it much better than me. But broadly, we get a stimulus, right? Our five senses: taste, eyes, smell, touch, right? We also, even our thoughts, whatever it is, our environment can trigger something in our brain. And if it's good, we get pleasure. But what happens when we get too much of it? So we're like, oh, hey, this felt good. Hey, this is really good. I'm going to do this. I'm going to watch the show. I'm going to play this game because it feels really good. Fantastic. That's kind of how we were built. What happens, though, when we try to hack that system, when we try to push it really, really hard, so we need one thing after another thing, it's like having 10 ice creams and then going for an 11th ice cream. Something happens in our natural response feedback system where our body adapts to what's happening and dulls it. So your finely tuned connoisseur body now has to dull the effect. So that's why you can watch like 10 episodes of something without fully paying attention. And you don't catch every detail of what's going on, but you're like, it's okay, it's pretty good, right? Because our body adapts to it, dulls it, and then if you want to get the exact same level of pleasure or feedback or hit, you have to do more. You know this, right? The technical term for what happens when you get dulled is anhedonic, right? Which means you no longer experience pleasure in the little things. And so this is happening everywhere to us. From taking drugs or chemicals to get a bit of a high, which will, and you guys know, invariably lead to you having to take more to get the same high, through to pornography, where you will then need to see more or hardcore stuff just to get the same high, all the way to TV and social media and gaming, where something that gives us an immediate feedback hit and we feel good. I mean, that's why it's called entertainment, right? It's been specifically designed to trigger pleasure centers in us so that it feels good. But what happens is when we have too much of it, when we overload ourselves with too much of it, you actually create that desire or that need to have more of it. And then it doesn't work as well. And then if you keep relying on this feedback system, you'll discover that there's only a small subset of things that you can do to recharge yourself. And I talk to people all the time about this. I have to watch 4 hours of TV. Oh, no, don't disturb me. I have a very stressful job, and it requires me to game for 3 hours a night just so that I could deal with the pressures of going to school the next day. You don't understand. And I understand because you've done it so many times that it is actually not recharging you the same way, all right? And so you need 3 hours. That's just how it works. Because you're needing that instead of small things giving us pleasure, like we've over leaned in so that you can't have even like 30 minutes of peace and quiet. You gotta have something to stimulate. You need that hit. You need that hit, right? Okay, so we have metrics for everything. We want to know the results fast. We want to get the feedback. We do something, we want to get the pleasure center. It turns out what happens is the next time we want it faster. That's just how it works. So you know the problem with amazing services on Sunday, like let's just take church world, because I kind of live in church world. But the problem with amazing services on Sunday that are so brilliantly executed and the sermon is short, which this one will not be, right? And the service is tight and you experience God. Every Sunday you experience God. The problem is that you're just going to adjust for that, and now you're going to go around from place to place to place trying to find a church or a service that'll do that for you. And maybe you won't hang around long enough in a church to develop long-standing, multi-generational relationships that you can speak into your life and into your family's life. Maybe you will never get, because you know what? You can't measure it on that Sunday. You just can't. And I don't know how, I'm trying my absolute best to explain this category of things, but it is so crucial. And the reason why I jumped to the end was I feel like it's so crucial because I'm reaping the benefits of it and wishing, deep wishing the best for every person who comes in on the Sunday, that they would have similar type rewards. Wisdom takes a long time to build. It just takes a long time to build. And so we actually need to do something in preparation for the future. Yeah. So it's like Proverbs, which says in 6-8, go to the ant, the sluggard. You should consider this ant, right? Without a chief, without officer or rules, she prepares her bread in summer and gathers her food in the harvest. When everybody is just eating the food, they're prepping. So there's no actual immediate feedback. When you eat the food, you feel full. You're like, oh yeah, this is really, really good. When you store the food, it actually takes your energy, it takes up storage, you gotta do all this, and for what? I don't know, something in the future. For what? But the future comes. By not overly relying on things that can be measured in the short term, we're actually able to prepare better for the future. So let's get right into the application. And I want to just have an honest dialogue with you. And some of you are older than me, some of you are younger, but at this stage, at 48, most of you are younger. Proverbs 24, 3-4 says, by wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established. By knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches. This is the verse that we're doing in our home group series, and I'm hoping to encourage you in this new season of your life, whatever this is. Even if you're not going through a new season in your life, the new post-COVID season, that's a new season for everybody's lives. Can I encourage you to sow into wise things and start building a house that wisdom has? And so we're going to end the service. I'm going to call the worship team up. And I'm going to get us all to reflect, actually, on things that we can sow in this current season. I'm not going to tell you answers. But man always says to me, don't preach one of these like very high-level conceptual sermons that you love preaching. You gotta get down to the details. You gotta get down to the practical. So I'm gonna just name some things. It's not the Bible or anything. right? I mean, you actually could find some of these in the Bible. But, it's just random things to kind of get you started so that you've got a rough idea. But I want to encourage you, as the worship team leads us in a song, right, where we focus on God, on things that are long-term, eternal. I will put it to you that God can't be measured, right? That maybe this prompts you a little bit. But I want to encourage you to lean in on the Holy Spirit for your specific season in life. But as I was reflecting on this, wow, what are some of the things that when I was been sowing in, these things have reaped in my own personal life rewards that at the time I was sowing it, I couldn't place a value on it. I couldn't. The first one for me was real intimacy and unity with my wife, actually. That turns out now 20-something years later, and she's the one who knows me the best, and we've gone through a whole lot. But it turns out, man, it was so worthwhile taking the time to listen to her details and all these long stories of different things and just get on the same page. Turns out, my goodness, it was a little bit, it was a hard work because we got married young, right? But turns out, it was like an immeasurable reward. Now that I've been in faith for 40-something years, I've discovered having a deep walk with God, built in God as a priority, remote control every morning, waking up, devotion with God, allowing the Holy Spirit to speak into my life without me even having to think about it. I don't even wake up with an alarm clock. It's so remote control in my life. Turns out, having a deep walk with God, my goodness. When I was in uni trying to build that discipline in, and I fail, couldn't do it and whatever, turns out, immeasurable. Friendship across generations. Sitting in a home group, I remember we had kids when we were really young, and oh no, I gotta be careful what I say, but I was in a really daggy home group. Yeah, because everybody was so much older than me. But they were having kids and they were speaking into our lives. And Yu Choi, who was our home group leader, he was much older than me. And it turns out, going through seemingly boring home groups where you don't feel like going out in the cold and meeting people and dragging your kids along, camping trips. Somebody weed in your tent. That last time we went to, oh my goodness. Turns out, those types of things that are really troublesome, they paid an immeasurable reward. Reading. Okay, I know not many readers here because the FGA Reader WhatsApp group has 3 people in it. I read 2 books a week. 2 a week. A habit that I picked up really young, and it was hard going. But my goodness. Saving, investing money when I was young. My parents tied up my money as soon as I got my job. And our house is on the market right now. And I think back and I go, my goodness. I'm so glad that instead of buying stacks of stuff that disappear with my money when I first started working, I invested it. Honesty, genuineness. That's something Pastor Roland taught me. To just, when you pastor, don't be a pretend pastor. No one's coming for the show. And so I'm glad that, I can wear my Mickey Mouse watch up on stage and we can talk about gaming nights on the Sunday or whatever it is. And that we can just be genuine in this church. It's actually helped a lot with my family, but it's helped me as well in the journey of pastoring. And then I think for me, the last one is responsibility and sowing. I'm really, really, really glad that someone gave me responsibilities when I was young, 12 years old, 11 years old. Having real responsibilities affect another person in life, to lead Sunday school or help or teach or run a home group when I was younger, like actual real responsibilities when I was young. It was a little bit of a pain because I was really bad at discharging the responsibility. But everybody learns when they do things over and over again. And I'm so glad it prepped me up, to be very honest with you. And I think that's part of the ethos of this church, which is why we see, you'll see young people playing drums, singing, having the responsibility of actually leading a congregation that maybe is older than you in worship, and then having to grapple with, am I the real deal? Am I actually worshiping God, or is this just for show? Being able to grapple with that at a young age, it preps you up for when you're in an older age and you feel like so much of your life is pretend because you're all talked up to be this big deal. And then you think back like David and Goliath. You think back like David and you go, I can do that. You don't know this about me, but I've met a bear and I've met a lion. So this is just Goliath. And so I want to encourage you. I don't know what it is that God wants to do in your life in this exact moment. You've come to church. I'm thrilled that you're here, but please hear the Holy Spirit in this. We're going to end with a song, and we'll do something a little bit different. I want you to either pull out your phone or a notebook or something like that. And as we do this song, I want you to write down, what is the wise thing for you to do in this season of your life? What is this wise thing? Or another way to rephrase it is, what will you sow that will reap things immeasurable? Father, I pray right now, Lord, that as we go into the song, that your Holy Spirit would move, that we would all take this time to hear your voice. Help us to just write a few things down and then look at it later, reflect on it later. I pray, Lord God, that you would attune our tastes, attune our senses to the things that are immeasurable, towards wisdom itself. In Jesus' name. To the song.